Welcome to the channel if you're new, or welcome back if you're returning. Every year around Memorial Day, I try to create a video and a project that honors our veterans. This year I made another flag similar to what I made 2 years ago. I'll put a picture of that flag right up here in this area, and you can see how it turned out. What I want to go through in this video is how I came up with the idea for replacing the center section of the previous flag, which were kneeling soldiers. And then I'm going to go through the steps in Vectric software to take that design idea, bring it into the software, and turn it into an actual design, and develop the toolpath that I could use to carve and then pour the epoxy colors. Finally, I'm going to go through the actual carving of each color, pouring that color, and end with you seeing the revealed magic. I probably shouldn't have shown the flag up front because you already see the magic unfolding, but it's always fun to watch it unfold as I surface this flag. With that, let's go ahead and get started into the process. I started out this project wanting to do something to honor the veterans and was trying to figure out the best way to approach it. And so I decided to go ahead and use the ChatGPT process that I've used in the past. And you can see over here what my prompt was. I said I want to create an image. I'm making a flag to honor veterans that is similar to this picture, the one above there. I want to replace the circular section of the praying soldier in the graveyard with another image. Please provide me multiple examples of images to honor veterans that I can replace the kneeling soldier with. And so through ChatGPT, it gave me several different versions and some ideas you can see here of things to do. And I went through all of those ideas, and as I looked at them and started exploring and going back and forth with ChatGPT, this is the one I finally settled on right here. So what I did was I downloaded this from ChatGPT, and I then took that into my Vectric software. Actually, what I did was I made this a black and white in something like Affinity Photo, and then I took that into my software for vCarve, and I did a bitmap trace. Let me show you what I did with that. I took the bitmap that I got from the ChatGPT and I brought that here into the Vectric. You can see it's in its own layer up here at the top. And now what I can do is I can go ahead and do a bitmap trace on this to get the eagle part of it to fill in where the other design was in the previous flag. So I'm going to go ahead, and you will see that I put a center eagle layer in place here, and I'm going to highlight that one. If I turn off the bitmap and turn that on, you see there's nothing there right at the moment. So we're going to go ahead and go to the bitmap layer. I'm going to go to the bitmap trace tool over here, and with that I'm going to click on the bitmap itself, and you can see everything lit up. I'm going to preview it. Since it's black and white, it should trace pretty easy. You can see how it's tracing right here. The layer that it's going to go onto is this center eagle layer because it's the default layer. So since these vectors look pretty good, I'm going to go ahead and hit apply. And now what I can do is I can turn off the bitmap layer, and the bitmap goes away, and you can see the remaining vectors. These are in a group. I'm going to hit ungroup, U for ungroup. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to take all the vectors that I want by going right to left, and I'm going to hit delete on those, and then I'm going to take these and put a box around those, and I'm going to hit delete on those, and now I'm going to put delete on these, and now all I have is this center vector left, and I'm going to grab that and I'm going to group it for now. So now that I have that center eagle, I can set that up in the future to sit with the rest of the flag. Let me show you what I have for the rest of the flag. I have the star field border, I have the stars, I have the black stripes and the white stripes or maple wood, and then if I want, I now can go ahead and bring in the eagle, and that eagle I can place wherever I want. And then I can go around and do all kinds of clipping and tracing to get to the point where this eagle is standing by itself with a circle around it. And then I can pour all of this into the epoxy in the right areas. So that's what I did. Now that's quite a bit of work, and that would take a long time to show you all of that. And if you want to see all of that, then let me know, and I can develop something on that in a live session or something so people that are interested can come watch it. But for now, I'm not going to put all that detail in there. Let me show you where I went. Now that I had the basic flag, everything in that I needed to, I started setting up and cutting vectors to get into the various pores that I was going to use. So let me take off these vectors here. And the first pore that I'm going to do is something called the clear pore. And what that does is I'm taking in anywhere where I'm going to have epoxy touching the wood, I am pouring a clear layer of 1/4 inch, a little bit more than 1/4 inch of clear epoxy. And that's to create a barrier so that my black epoxy does not bleed into my maple. So that's going to be my first pour. Then once I've got the clear in there, the next pour that I will do is my black pour, which is going to include all of this central area, all of these black stripes, all of the flag border, everything else. You can see wherever the black is. And one of the things I want you to notice is that just outside the black is where that clear epoxy is. So that is going to be stopping the black epoxy from getting into the maple wood. Once I have the black epoxy in, the next pour that I'm going to do is the white pour. And so that's where the eagle went. So I took the eagle and I placed it in this area, and I put a ring around it, and part of the eagle was this beak and this inner eye, and you'll see what I did with that is I made that yellow. So now I'm going to make that yellow. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I wanted to put the armed services organizations in this stripe right here. So I built a set of vectors that are the armed services stripes. So Navy, Army, Marines, Air Force, Coast Guard. And so those were built in right here. So that's how I got all of this flag set up for the various pours. The other thing you'll see in my alignment tree is, or in my tree, is this alignment pins. So you'll see me using alignment dowels so that I can take this flag on and off my CNC and always get it in the exact place. So that's the method I was using for this flag. I used to just depend on the fence, but I've removed my fence and have some dog holes, so I'm using an extra step here. And once I got all that done, of course, I've got my surfacing path that I need for making sure that I can get this whole flag surfaced. All right, at this point in the process, we've gone through how I got the ideas for the center section through ChatGPT, how I took those and brought those into the Vectric software, and now we're getting ready to look at the toolpaths that I've created in the previous section and how deep I want to make those go. So there's two steps when I'm designing multicolor epoxy projects. The first step is setting all of those toolpaths up, and the second one is being able to preview it. It's actually then a third step after that, which is creating the final toolpaths. So in this process right now, what we're going to do is we're going to go through in the order of colors that I'm going to pour, and we're going to start out with the first one being at 0.05 inches, and then I'll set that toolpath color to a color I can actually see in the preview mode. Once I do that, then to see the next color, I need to go slightly deeper, which is 0.05 inches more, or 0.1 inches for the black, because the black is the next color. So that will get me through the clear, and I'll be able to see it through using coloring of the toolpaths. Then once I get done with the black, I want to go see the white and the yellow and the blues and the reds in the subsequent colors. So that's what you're going to see me do, is set each color so that I'll actually be able to see it in the preview. That was the second step. The third step then is setting them to the final depths, which I can't remember whether I covered that in this video or not. But the final depths are 0.15 for my first pour, which is the clear pour, and every other pour after that is going to be 0.13 inches deep. Let me suggest that if you like what you're seeing at this time, would you just take a moment, give me a like, share, or comment to get this video more exposure? And if you're learning things and you want to hear more about future videos where you can learn about multicolor epoxy or other things that I put on my YouTube channel, then make sure you subscribe and hit that all button, and you'll get notified of future videos when I turn them out. I've got plenty of videos in the past, if you're not already subscribed, if you're interested in multicolor epoxy, that you can learn from. That's why my videos are a little bit longer, as I try to teach the process so that you could follow along and do it yourself if you want. With that, let's go ahead and get started back in the video, okay? Here's how I go ahead and preview this to make sure it's all going to work together. So remember the pores that I put in place. The first pour I had was my clear pour, and let me close this for a second, and you can see the toolpaths I have here. So the clear pour, I'm going to go down 0.05, and I will go down to 0.15 when I'm doing this pour, but for the purposes of this video and demonstrating how it's going to look, I'm just going to go down to 0.05. Hit calculate, continue anyway. I've got some vectors crossing, I know that. And now that I've got that in place, hit close, and let's preview what that's going to look like. So we're going to hit preview, visible. And so here's where all of the clear epoxy is going to go. So the next pour that I'm going to do, and this is only for demo purposes so you'll be able to see it unfolding, is the black pour. Now, what's got me a little surprised here is I see this beak back here. Oh, maybe that's because I've got the vectors turned on. Yeah, there we go. Turn off the vectors. So hit calculate. What I've done is I've selected the black pour. If you come over here, you'll see I selected the black pour vector right here. Hit close. And now we're going to preview this. And this is everywhere the black is going to go. And you can see outside the ring here the clear. So that's to prevent the bleeding. And then we still have white. So I'm going to go to the white. And what I did was select all the white pour vectors, as you can see right there. Hit calculate. Hit close. And let's preview that. And then we've got the yellow pour. Same thing. I grabbed the yellow vectors. Calculate. Well, we're going to go over here, grab it. Yellow pour. Close. Calculate. Review. And so there's where the yellow is going to go. And then right in here are the armed surfaces. And so these vectors over here are for the armed surfaces and putting those in. And then the vectors down here is for surfacing and cutting the rest of it out. I think we've covered enough of how this is going to unfold. With that, let's go ahead to the actual project and show how we got this put together and carved in the wood and the final results. What you see me doing here is placing alignment holes so that I can make sure I can take the board on and off and always have it in the same location for my carves. Alright, these next tool paths are 4 minutes and 19 minutes. I'm cutting out the clear. I'll start with my Vbit, or my tapered ball nose. Recall from the software design portion of this video that I'm putting a clear channel around everywhere where the black might bleed in to the maple, and that's what this toolpath is all about. At this time we've switched bits, so I'm going to the clearance bit. It's a larger bit, and I'll put the dust shoe on so that I can keep it under control. So the next thing is you've got to brush all this out and clear it all out. I'm at the point in this process of making this flag. This is a flag to honor the veterans. What I did was the other day I flattened this couple pieces of maple. They had a lot of twists in them. And then I smoothed them out and I glued them together in a panel. I was really happy with how that turned out because you can't even see the glue line in here, which is awesome. Now I was going to probably cover that up with some epoxy potentially, but it's hard to say where that glue line was going to arrive. So you can't even tell this is a glued up piece of maple. So I was really happy with that. So the next step I did was I carved in a 1/4 inch border all the way around wherever the black stripes were going to be. And I filled that with clear epoxy, and that clear epoxy is now dried. And so we're at the point where I'm going to carve in the black, and it's the biggest carve of this project. And then after I get the black stripes all poured and hardened in here in the black part of the flag, then I'll go ahead and carve in the white parts. I've got a white part, I've got a yellow part. So we'll get started on carving right now, and that's where we're at, is carving the black part of this. And then once we have that, then we'll carve in the white. So one of the things you'll notice when you're carving with your Vbit, or in this case I'm using a tapered ball nose, it'll be the same one whether I use the Vbit or the tapered ball nose. You'll notice that if you're carving a thin line, in other words just basically one bit thickness, that it feels like it's kind of welded in there or glued in there. The epoxy, remember, the epoxy kind of melts. So after we get all said and done, I just didn't want you, if you're going to do an epoxy inlay, to get all freaked out when you see this compacted epoxy in here. When you do the clearance pass, that will help with some of it. And it may turn out, after you try to clean it up, if it's too sticky, that you go ahead and run the vCarve toolpath again. So now what we're getting ready to do is trade over the bit, and then we're going to run the clearance path. One of the things I want to point out is that we're taking out quite a bit of material here. And then after we do that, we're going to pour some epoxy in there, and we're going to take and heat that material up. So there is a very good chance that this board is going to want to warp on me. And there's nothing I can do about it but to hold it down. And if it turns out that I can't, if it warps too much, that I can't keep it nice and flat on its own, I may actually have to put some supports in the back here. But the reason I'm mentioning it is what I wanted you to notice is that the way I'm holding this board down is I've got actually screws into my spoiler board. Here, 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 and here. And if I have a smaller and a thicker board, then lots of times I'll use side clamps. I've had some problems with my side clamps recently on a couple projects because I replaced my fence system with these dog holes, and I'll talk about that in another video. But these dog holes flex a little bit more, and if I put just different pressures of clamp on there, I'll find these dog holes will flex a little bit. So on this project where it's critical that everything is lined up, and how I've been doing it lately is I've got a dowel into the spoiler board here and a dowel into the spoiler board here, so it keeps everything aligned. And to help with the bending, as this thing starts to potentially warp, I've got these 4 screws in there. And if it does warp, then when I go put it back on here, I'll take and put those screws back in there again, and it'll pull it flat as long as it doesn't warp too bad. And that's when I make my next carves and pours, everything will be on a flat, and then I'll have to figure out how to hold this thing flat for the long term. With that, I just wanted to give you a heads up of what might happen if you're carving into a piece this big. This is a lot of epoxy and a wide board. The chance for cupping is almost certain. It's just how much it's going to cup and what I'll have to deal with. So let's go ahead and cut the section now where I'm using the clearance bit. I'm using a roughing bit in this case because I've already cleared away from there, and I'm going to just use a down cut bit so that I don't pull up the epoxy or the wood edges. So using a down cut bit. If I had epoxy, if this was all epoxy, I'd be using an O-flute bit. At this point now, I'm getting ready to make up the black epoxy and put it into this board here. This will be 15 ounces of epoxy, 5 ounces the hardener and 10 ounces of epoxy. And for this pour, I'll be using Eye Candy Pigments Ronin Black. As you notice, I start pouring the black, trying to get it spread across all of the different areas, and then I start going along the edges with a toothpick and a small stir stick and making sure that everything is done in the corners, and I get the black epoxy spread out and I start the swirling process. So this is what the flag's looking like so far. Need to let it dry for about 6 to 8 hours here probably. And then I can carve into it and put the white in it. I'm a little nervous because it's not quite overflowing here. So that means the epoxy is going to be a little thinner than normal. I have to be careful that I don't mill that off. And if I'm hoping I don't get a lot of cupping in the board. So there's still a lot of possibilities for things to go wrong on this. Keep my fingers crossed and keep moving through it. It's always an adventure. We're now at the point that we want to do the white carving. So this black is all hard. I can tell it's hard by I can't put my fingernail into it. So now we're going to go ahead and carve in, and then we'll pour the white epoxy into this. And then once the white epoxy is hardened, then we'll do one more pour for some yellow colored epoxy. So with that, let's go ahead and get started carving into this. By the way, I forgot to mention I'm using an O-flute bit for this. So 1/8 inch O-flute bit, and then my 46-280 tapered ball nose. Okay, I just checked the running time, and the running time for this O-flute bit is going to be 36 minutes, give or take a minute, and the running time for the 46-280 tapered ball nose is going to be about 54 minutes. So we got some carving to do here. At this point in the process, we just finished using an O-flute bit, a 1/8 inch O-flute bit, to do the clearance pass. And now we're switching over to a tapered ball nose, 12.4 degree, that I use as a Vbit, 46280 in the Amana. I'm going to use that now to do the rest of it, the detail work. And that one's about a 54-minute toolpath, so it's a long toolpath. I'll, of course, have this on time-lapse on this camera, and on this camera, I'll film it regular, and then I can go ahead, speed it up in the video when we get done. All right, we got this thing off the machine now. I'm getting ready to pour white in these areas and taking one last look to make sure there's no leftover crud in any of these corners or anything, and I think it's looking pretty darn good. Let me just blow it out one time with air here. We'll mix up 3 ounces of moss epoxy. I'm going to be using Eye Candy Say You White. I really want this to be quite opaque, so I think I might put just a couple drops of liquid white pigment in it also. I'm not liking the look of this. I might run out here. I might have to mix another batch. First time in a while I've done this. I'm going to have to mix another batch here real quick. After getting all of the epoxy mixed and poured in where it needed to be, the next step is to take a toothpick and go around and make sure that all of the little pockets are filled with epoxy. At this time in the project, we've got the black poured, we've got the white poured. I'm getting ready to put in some yellow in here for a beak and an eye. And also I'm going to engrave a couple squares for each arm of the surfaces to fill up this stripe. And so I'll have 5 squares, one for the Army, one for the Navy, one for the Marines, one for the Coast Guard, and one for the Air Force. So I'm going to be pouring different colors of epoxy to represent those. And so that's our next step, is starting to carve for the yellow and carve for those different colors. We're going to start with a 46280 bit, which represents my Vbit, and then I'll switch over to an O-flute bit and a 1/8 inch downcut bit. All right, so I've actually started the yellow carve now. So this is the first path. We're getting ready for the yellow in this flag. We're getting ready to do the second cut for the yellow beak and eye, and we're using a O-flute bit, 1/8 inch O-flute. So what I'm doing is changing out the bit to a 1/8 inch downcut bit for the wood part. And then we will switch over to the 46280 bit. Well, we just finished the yellow carve, which goes into this beak here for the eagle, and the eye. I don't know if you can see the eye very well, but there's a hole right here. And then we also just went ahead and carved away for having stripes. There'll be 5 blocks in here for each of the armed services. I'm going to go with the Navy, the Army, the Air Force, the Marines, and the Coast Guard. At this point in the process, I'm getting ready to pour banners for each of the armed services. I'll start with the Navy. This will be the Army. I haven't cut it yet. This is the Air Force, this is Coast Guard, and this is a Marine. So for the Navy, I'm going to use Ocean Blue, Eye Candy Ocean Blue. Okay, I definitely only need 1 squirt of each. Air Force will be Angel Blue. For the Marines, I'll be using Senshei Red. All right, at this point in the project, we are ready to surface this board. It's gotten nice and hard, and we're going to start by, I've zeroed this bit off the board right here, and we're going to go down 0.01 inches each time I surface it, or a little bit more depending on how I manage it. With that, let's go ahead and get started surfacing. And for those of you that have done this epoxy stuff, Bill, Brooks, this is where the magic happens, right? This is when everything comes together when you get this reveal. This is the coolest part. That eagle beak and everything turned out pretty awesome, I think. I'm liking the way that came out. Now, what you will see is there are some low spots still here in the epoxy, so I'm going to have to make another at least 1 pass, maybe 2. I knew that I had skimped a little bit on the epoxy, so I didn't overflow it like I normally do. So there are a couple low spots that I still have to get totally surfaced. So that's what you're going to see me do now, is I'm going to go down to the 0 that I was before, and I'm going to go down maybe, let's see here, I'm going to go down 2/10 or 0.2 millimeters on this and start again. I gotta say, I was really happy with how this turned out. All the colors really are popping even before they're being sanded. There's no bleed in the maple. The process worked out perfectly. And next step is to sand it to the right grits that I want and then put a finish on it. That's pretty much a wrap. I've shown all the things that I think are interesting to people. The rest that I have to do is sanding and then finishing, and that is kind of like watching grass grow sometimes and probably isn't that interesting. I'll explain what I do. I start out with 80 grit sandpaper. I use a ROS sander. I typically use my Festool or my Surf Prep sander, depending on whether I'm doing a flat surface or whether I'm doing a contoured surface. So I start out with 80 grit, then I go through the grits all the way up to 400 or 500 usually. Sometimes I'll stop at 320 depending on the sheen that I want with my project. I also have a video out there that I'll put in the description for how I would polish it if I really wanted to get an extra luster sheen. But I typically only polish when I'm using like a clear overcoat or overpour and I'm trying to see through the clear coat. Most of the time I stop around 400. Sometimes I will go up higher, like I said, depending on what sheen I want. After I do that, the way I would finish this project would be to use a rattle can lacquer of some sort. Usually I like the semi-gloss or the satin. I tend to lean more towards the satin finish. Now, if I'm going to be doing this on something that is going to be touching food or having food served on it, I'll typically go to my go-to these days is Bumbleshoots finish. And I'll use two types of Bumbleshoots. So let me reach back here. I've got them out here so I wouldn't forget. The first one is their all-natural wood finish. I'll start with that. So I'll start with the all-natural wood finish, and then I'll end up with their Benuba hard wax. I like that finish. It's been holding up well on the projects I've used it on. I also like the smell. And frankly, I'm one of those people that like to support small companies or companies who seem to cater to makers. And this company has done a good job of that so far. So I always like to help out the small folks when I can. Hopefully you've picked up a trick or two on working with multicolor epoxy through this video. And if you've found it valuable, you know what I want you to do. I want you to like, comment, share, and subscribe if you're not subscribed yet. That's the standard go-to as I try to build this channel. My channel is building slowly, but I don't have that interesting, dynamic set of characteristics that draw people in. Most people that come to my channel are coming because they want to learn something, and I take the time to show them and teach them. With that, if you're not doing something you enjoy, try to swap and do something you enjoy. Hope you're getting out in the shop, making time for your projects, whether they're maker projects, woodworking projects, engraving, whatever it is you like to do. You've got to enjoy life. Life is short. Life is very short. With that, until we meet back in this medium again, I'm wishing you the very best.
Rosie, stomp your feet, Rosie, stomp your feet. Rosie, stomp your feet, feet, feet. Rosie, stomp your feet, Rosie, stomp your feet. Rosie, stomp your feet.